Imagine standing outside the corporate headquarters of Stripe or, Coinbase on just a random Sunday afternoon.
Right.
You pull out a megaphone, you stare up at the executive suites, and you just shout to the billionaires inside, like, drop $100,000 down here right now. Give me 3 months, and I will hand you the exact blueprint to turn this company into a trillion-dollar sun.
Which sounds completely deranged.
It sounds like absolute madness. I mean, you'd expect security to escort you off the premises immediately.
Oh, absolutely.
But in the middle of May 2026, one thinker did exactly that. And not on a physical sidewalk, obviously, but across the digital town square in full view of the entire global tech community.
Yeah, it is a phenomenal disruption of standard operating procedure. What we are examining today is this vast, just intricately woven tapestry of ideas, public pitches, and honestly, incredibly bold prophecies.
Yeah.
And all of this was published on Sunday, May 17th, 2026, by an author and thinker named Paramendra Kumar Bhagat.
Okay, let's unpack this, because at first glance, if you were just scrolling through his feed, it looks like a chaotic collision of tech manifestos, hyper-niche blog indices, and spiritual treatises.
It does. It really does.
But when you start pulling the threads together, a highly structured and fiercely ambitious worldview emerges. We are basically opening up the digital notebook of a modern polymath who is trying to solve the universe's economic, technological, and spiritual equations all at the exact same time.
What's fascinating here is how the synthesis actually works. I mean, he is taking metaphysical concepts and hard-coding them into venture capital terminology, quantum computing architectures, and global logistics.
Right.
It's not just theory. The core theme tying every single one of these threads together is something he calls the Grand Solara vision.
The Grand Solara vision.
Exactly. It is his operational blueprint for the impending age of abundance. And what's wild is that he claims this era was prophesied in ancient scriptures thousands of years ago, but insists it can only be built using, 2026 infrastructure.
Which is such a brain-breaking juxtaposition. So let's look at the central claim driving this entire vision. He states, repeatedly and publicly, there will be as many Solaras in 10 years as there are unicorns today.
Right. And we all know the tech lexicon. A unicorn is that billion-dollar privately held startup.
Yeah, the term was coined because a billion-dollar valuation used to be a mythical, impossibly rare beast.
Exactly. But Paramendra is essentially looking at that ecosystem and declaring it obsolete. I mean, $1 billion is just table stakes now.
Yeah.
He's mapping this transition in a piece titled Unicorn to Solara, a journey of imagination.
Right. So we are moving from a mythical horse to a trillion-dollar celestial body.
And the metaphor carries massive structural implications. Like, a unicorn, by definition, is a standalone anomaly, right? It's an isolated entity you capture for a high valuation.
It's something you hunt.
Exactly. You hunt it. But a sun, a Solara, is a gravitational anchor. It provides the heat, the light, and the physical pull that keeps an entire system of orbiting planets alive.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Yeah, a trillion-dollar company under his framework isn't just about achieving a massive market cap. It requires ecosystem responsibility.
Right. You can't just be a parasite at that size.
Exactly. This is why his follow-up piece is titled Unicorn to Solara with Purpose, Marketing, Mergers, and Responsible Capitalism. Yeah. You cannot achieve Solara status if you extract without giving back. You have to alter the physics of the economy around you.
Which brings us back to that megaphone pitch. Because he is actively hunting for these proto-suns, if you look at the source material, he is on X, tagging the leadership of the most vital infrastructure companies in the world.
Yep.
He's pinging Patrick and John Collison at Stripe, Brian Armstrong at Coinbase, the leadership teams at GitLab, Replit, Rippling, Deal, Fair, Brex, Micho.
And notice the common denominator in that list.
They're all foundational, right?
Right. These are not consumer-facing social media apps or like fleeting hardware fads. Stripe is the circulatory system of internet finance.
Yeah, exactly.
Coinbase is the gateway to decentralized capital.
Yeah.
Replit and GitLab are where the code that runs the world is actually written. They already possess massive gravitational pull.
And his pitch to them is identical and totally unfiltered. He tags the executives and writes, and I'm quoting here, "Hire me to create a grand Solara vision for your company on 100K, 8 to 12 weeks to delivery."
That's it.
That's it. No networking, no introductory Zoom calls, no, let's grab coffee. Just wire me $100,000 and I'll hand you the keys to the trillion-dollar club.
It's incredibly bold.
If you are listening to this right now and wondering why anyone would use this hyper-public, hyper-premium consulting tactic. I mean, I am right there with you. It feels borderline reckless. Why not just work the back channels?
Well, because working the back channel is a standard B2B transaction.
Right.
Broadcasting this on a Sunday afternoon for the entire tech sector to see that as an act of public manifestation.
Mm-hmm.
By tagging these specific founders, he's instigating a very specific kind of FOMO.
Fear of missing out, yeah.
Exactly. At the absolute apex of capitalism. He is publicly challenging them. Like, you built a unicorn, congratulations. But the game just changed to Solara. Are you capable of evolving? Or are you going to be swallowed by a competitor who is?
Oh, wow.
It forces the executives to at least acknowledge the paradigm shift happening in their own industry.
Okay, let's test that logic. Because to actually build a Solara, you can't just rebrand your mission statement. You can't just say, we're a sun now.
Right, you need actual heat.
Exactly. You need a technological engine capable of generating $1 trillion of value. And Paramendra points to a few specific catalysts, starting with what he calls Lumina AI, the $1 trillion sun.
Yes.
But he doesn't stop at digital intelligence, which is fascinating. He aggressively pushes a concept called praesogenetics.
Yes, praesogenetics.
And the full title of this piece is critical to understand. It's called Praesogenetics, the technology that lets us watch life think. How photons, cells, and AI may help us cure cancer and rewrite medicine.
I mean, watching life think is one of the most arresting phrases in this entire collection.
It really is. It fundamentally reframes biology. Like, we're so used to treating the human body like a very complicated, slightly damp machine.
The wet machine, yeah.
Right. We take a scan, we look at a static image of a tumor, and then we attack it. But watching it think implies we are observing dynamic, real-time decision-making at the cellular level.
And to watch a cell think, you can't just put it under a stronger lens. That's old paradigm. You have to track its chemical and electrical signals instantaneously.
Okay, how does he propose we do that?
The mechanics he is suggesting here involve the convergence age, which is actually another of his book titles. He is talking about utilizing photon-emitting biosensors at the molecular level and pairing that data exhaust with an AI capable of mapping the cellular decision tree as it happens.
Wait, mapping the decision tree of a cell?
Yes. So the AI wouldn't just detect a cancer mutation after the fact. It would theoretically predict the cell's decision to mutate before the physical structure even changes.
That is wild. So it's AI converging with wetware.
Exactly.
And he has two incredibly contradictory posts right next to each other about this. One says, Praesogenetics, too big for VC. And the very next one says, Praesogenetics, ready to raise.
Yeah.
I read that as a massive indictment of the current Silicon Valley funding model.
It is absolutely a systemic critique. I mean, the traditional venture capital timeline demands, what, a 10x return within a 5 to 7 year window?
Yeah, roughly.
That model is brilliant for scaling software as a service.
Right.
But it is fundamentally useless for a technology that requires mapping the photon-level communications of the human genome.
Because it just takes too long.
Right. Watching life think might require $50 billion of patient capital with a 20-year horizon. He is stating that the financial mechanisms themselves are obsolete. The technology is ready to raise. But the VC world is simply too small or too impatient to fund the next leap in human evolution.
Which means the physical world has to be entirely restructured to support these new massive leaps. Which brings us to his logistics ideas. We all know how Amazon Web Services abstracted away the server room, right?
Yep, the cloud.
You don't buy hardware anymore, you just rent a slice of the cloud. Well, Paramendra is proposing something called physical AWS, how the logistics cloud will reshape global commerce and ignite the age of abundance.
Physical AWS. It's a brilliant concept.
He literally wants to apply packet switching logic to physical atoms.
Yeah, consider the bottlenecks of our current supply chain. I mean, a ship gets stuck in a canal or a factory goes offline in one country, and global commerce just grinds to a halt for months.
We saw that with the Suez Canal, right?
Exactly. The physical AWS framework suggests a logistics cloud where supply chains operate autonomously. If a manufacturing node fails in Vietnam, an agentic AI system immediately reroutes the raw materials, contracts a facility in Mexico, and diverts the shipping lanes. Automatically, all with the friction of an email routing around a damaged server.
That's incredible, and he backs this up with aggressive terrestrial infrastructure plans. He has blogs titled The Hyperloop, Not High-Speed Rail, is California's Future, and Grounded Greatness, the Case for Smart Surface Transit in Future Cities.
Yes.
But the one that really caught my eye, and I think you'll agree, is Earth-to-Earth rocketry plus Hyperloop, Earth before Mars.
Oh, that is a stark philosophical line drawn in the sand.
Yeah, because we are in an era where the most prominent billionaires are actively funneling capital into making humanity multiplanetary. They're looking at Mars.
Right, but Paramendra is arguing that trying to colonize Mars while our terrestrial supply chains are still built on 20th century combustion engines is a massive misallocation of resources.
Yeah, he's saying prioritize our own planet.
Exactly. The age of abundance requires point-to-point rocketry to move physical goods across the globe in under an hour. You cannot build a trillion-dollar sun if it takes 6 weeks to ship a microchip across the ocean.
It's basically saying, let's fix the crumbling foundation of our own house before we try to build a shed in the vacuum of space.
That's a perfect way to put it.
But to run a physical AWS, to have a system that can autonomously route rockets and hyperloops without human intervention, you need a complete paradigm shift in computing,
You do.
which introduces my absolute favorite concept in his stack. The party is over. From vibe coding to agentic engineering.
I love that phrase. Vibe coding perfectly encapsulates the 2023 to 2025 era of generative AI.
It really does. Vibe coding is like driving a car with cruise control. You are still sitting in the driver's seat, you're keeping your hands near the wheel, and you are just coaxing the AI along.
Right.
You tell it, make me a database that looks sleek, and you adjust the parameters until the vibe is right. It requires constant human supervision.
But Paramendra says that era is dead.
Mhm.
We're moving to agentic engineering, supported by titles like Agentic AI, set to explode in 2026.
So what's the leap there? For you listening, what does that actually mean?
Well, the leap from vibe coding to agentic engineering is like going from cruise control to hiring a logistics firm to move your entire house. You don't tell the logistics firm how to turn the steering wheel of the truck or how to tape the boxes. You just give them the destination address.
Oh, I see.
Agentic AI implies giving an autonomous system a macro goal. You say, optimize our Asian supply chain for a 15% cost reduction. And the AI goes into the code base, writes the functions, spins up the servers, tests the deployments, and executes the strategy entirely on its own.
Without you checking the code line by line.
Exactly.
He even mentions a grand Solara vision for Cursor, which is, a massively popular AI code editor. He's envisioning a future where the computing environment itself is fluid. He calls it liquid computing, the future of human-tech symbiosis.
Liquid computing is the necessary hardware evolution for agentic AI.
Because you can't do this on old servers.
Right. You can't run an autonomous logistics cloud on static, rigid architecture. The computing power has to flow and shape itself around the immediate problem, which he ties directly to his writings on quantum computing, applications and implications.
Okay, if you are listening to this right now, your brain might be comfortably categorizing this as a highly aggressive, but, somewhat standard Silicon Valley futurist manifesto.
Sure.
We've got autonomous AI, we've got physical supply chain clouds, we've got biotech. But this is exactly the point where the neatly paved road ends and Paramendra drags us straight into the jungle.
He really does.
Because he recognizes a fatal flaw in his own technological utopia.
He addresses it bluntly in his piece. AI and robotics break capitalism.
Right. If agentic AI is writing the code, and precigenetics is curing the diseases, and physical AWS is handling all the logistics, human labor becomes largely obsolete.
Yes.
And if humans aren't working, they aren't earning wages. If they aren't earning wages, they can't buy the goods the autonomous factories are producing.
The feedback loop breaks.
Exactly. The entire math of traditional scarcity-based economics just collapses. So Paramendra looks completely outside the Western economic canon for a solution.
Which is fascinating.
He introduces Kalkism, the economic and spiritual blueprint for an age of abundance.
It is an incredibly audacious metaphysical pivot.
To say the least.
In Hindu eschatology, Kalki is the prophesied 10th and final avatar of Vishnu, who descends to end the Kali Yuga, which is the age of darkness and strife, and usher in a new epoch of truth.
Okay.
Paramendra is taking an ancient prophecy of cosmic renewal and reverse engineering it into a macroeconomic policy.
He has pieces titled The Last Age, Lord Kalki, Prophecy, and the Final War for Peace, and one simply called Prophecies Are Proof of God.
Yeah.
But he is hyper-aware of how this sounds to a modern economic audience because he explicitly publishes a disclaimer: Kalkism is not communism.
That distinction is crucial. When people hear age of abundance or see blueprints for a post-labor society, their default mental model snaps to a Marxist utopia where a centralized state redistributes all resources.
Right. Everyone gets a universal basic income from the government, that kind of thing.
Exactly. But by explicitly rejecting communism, Paramendra is asserting that Kaukaism still relies on market dynamics and individual enterprise. It just utilizes an entirely different ledger for value.
And we see the mechanics of that ledger in his piece, Velocity Money, Crypto, Karma, and the End of Traditional Economics.
Yes.
Wait, hold on. For everyone listening, let's pause here. A karmic blockchain. How does that even functionally operate? Because on paper, ancient spiritual laws of cause and effect and, highly speculative digital tokens repel each other.
They seem like oil and water.
No.
But let's theorize the mechanics of how he brings them together.
Okay.
Traditional fiat currency only tracks the transfer of capital. It doesn't care if that capital was used to build a hospital or fund a sweatshop.
Right, a dollar is a dollar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what if currency was programmed via smart contracts? Velocity money suggests a system where the speed and utility of a transaction alter its value.
Alter its value, how?
Well, if you hoard the capital, it degrades. But if you deploy it into ecosystem-benefiting actions that align with the purpose of a Solara, the capital multiplies or unlocks new tiers of utility.
So the blockchain becomes a decentralized ledger for societal good. It's basically mathematically enforced karma.
Exactly the concept. It creates a socioeconomic framework where extracting value is penalized by the code itself, and generating positive karmic velocity is rewarded.
That is wild.
And it is important to state clearly to our listeners that our goal here is to map the architecture of this proposed system, right?
Yeah.
We are not endorsing its theological underpinnings or, frankly, its economic feasibility.
Absolutely. We are impartially exploring the machinery he's designing. And that machinery requires a massive physical realignment of global power.
Yes, it does.
Because the age of abundance doesn't just switch on when a VC cuts a check in California. It requires the entire geopolitical board to be flipped.
Which is why his writings focus heavily on the subcontinent and the Middle East as the new centers of gravity.
Right.
He outlines the $500 billion pivot, how the India-U.S. alliance can reshape global trade. He writes about Condor Galaxy India. India and UAE team up on compute alongside a manifesto to transform Bangalore.
The India-UAE Compute Alliance is fascinating because it proves he knows exactly where the actual leverage is in 2026.
He's very pragmatic about it.
Yeah, the future of AI doesn't run on good intentions. It runs on energy-intensive compute clusters. Sovereign wealth funds in the Middle East have the capital, and the subcontinent has the engineering density. He's pointing to a massive shift in hemispheric power.
And he tracks the friction of this transition closely. He has authored several novels exploring the potential fallout with titles like The Great Subcontinent Uprising, The Banyan Revolt, and Deported.
Wow. So he's writing fiction about the transition, too.
Yes. He understands that moving to an age of abundance will inherently trigger immense geopolitical instability.
Which explains why he is obsessively tracking political actors across the entire spectrum. And again, for you listening, we are analyzing his use of these figures strictly as variables in his geopolitical equation. We are not taking a political stance here, just reporting what's in the text.
Of course.
He writes about Trump's default, the mist of empire, and Trump's trade war. And then on the completely opposite side, he tracks AOC 2028, the future of American progressivism.
He's looking at the whole board.
Right. He touches on global flashpoints, noting Netanyahu's eighth front in Israel and asserting that peace for Taiwan is possible. But the title that completely stopped me in my tracks, and I had to reread it, was Bernie Cracked AI Safety.
It is a profoundly counterintuitive premise.
I really have to push back on this on behalf of anyone listening who understands AI development. How does a democratic socialist framework crack AI safety?
It sounds contradictory, doesn't it?
Totally. We just established that training these massive Solara-level AI models requires hundreds of billions of dollars in private capital and compute. Is he suggesting that we nationalize the AI models? Because democratic socialism and ultra-capitalist tech infrastructure usually view each other as the enemy.
If we follow his logic regarding Kelkyism and the need for a reorganized UN built from ground up, the premise actually begins to make sense.
Okay, lay it out for me.
He isn't suggesting nationalizing the models. He is suggesting that AI safety cannot be solved by a handful of tech CEOs signing a voluntary ethics pledge.
Oh, sure. Self-regulation rarely works.
Right. The only way to ensure an agentic AI doesn't optimize humanity out of existence is to bind its foundational objectives to massive, democratically accountable safety frameworks.
I see.
The exact kind of broad societal safety nets championed by figures like Bernie Sanders. He is viewing politicians not just as policymakers, but as philosophical architects whose underlying moral frameworks need to be coded into the machines.
Wow, so he's trying to merge the moral framework of a socialist safety net with the hyper-capitalist engine of a trillion-dollar Solara.
Exactly.
That is a brain-breaking juxtaposition, but it is actually the perfect segue into the most jarring contradiction in this entire collection of sources.
You are referring to the survival phase.
Yes. Oh my gosh. We have just spent the last 40 minutes dissecting trillion-dollar suns, quantum logistics, the karmic blockchain, and the geopolitical realignment of the globe.
Huge macro ideas.
And right in the middle of these cosmic, earth-shattering manifestos, Paramendra publishes blog posts titled Side Hustles That Work in 2025, Frugal Living Tips That Work, and Remote Work Productivity Hacks.
It induces a kind of intellectual whiplash, doesn't it?
It is hilarious. It is like having an intense, hours-long debate with an architect about how to construct a Dyson sphere to harvest the energy of the sun. And as you are packing up your notes, he leans across the table and whispers, "By the way, if you buy generic brand oatmeal, you can save $14 a month on groceries."
It feels absurd. But honestly, this is the exact hallmark of a truly grounded intellect.
You think so?
Absolutely. It is macro vision paired flawlessly with micro execution. Paramendra recognizes the brutal reality of the transition period.
Yeah.
We are currently living in the gap between the breakdown of traditional capitalism and the arrival of the age of abundance. While the architects are busy coding the physical AWS, everyday people are being laid off.
Right. They still have to pay rent.
They still have to buy groceries.
It's the ultimate pragmatism. If you're listening to this and rolling your eyes at the grand prophecies, he gets it. He's basically telling you, yes, the future is calciism, but today is Tuesday, and you need a side hustle to pay your electricity bill.
And he applies this grounded reality to the startup world, too.
Oh, right, the equity piece.
Yeah, he doesn't just pitch 100K visions. He writes highly tactical pieces like 30-30-30-10, a better equity formula for tech startups, where he's trying to fix the actual cap tables of these companies today.
Which is very practical.
Very. And he's equally aware of his own position in the ecosystem. He publishes a satirical piece titled Himalayan Compute, 100 VCs Who Said No.
Oh, I love that.
He understands exactly how grandiose and outlandish his public pitches down to traditional venture capital, and he chooses to weaponize that rejection through satire. It adds a deeply human, vulnerable layer to an otherwise hyper-intellectual output.
And that humanity extends into his artistic output as well.
Yeah.
We mentioned the novels briefly before, but he's a remarkably prolific novelist.
Yes.
He has written Around the World in 1,000 Days, The Country of Geniuses, A Race Through AI Adolescence, and a massive project called Gen Z Kranti.
Which means Gen Z Revolution.
Right. And it's published in Maithili, Hindi, and Nepali. He is basically using fiction as a Trojan horse to smuggle these massive societal shifts into mainstream culture.
But perhaps his most vital writing for the individual living through this transition is a behavioral theory he outlines. It is titled Vertical Martial Arts, Social Concentric Circles, and Non-Reaction.
Non-reaction.
Yeah.
I want to zero in on this because when you look at the backdrop of the world he published this into in mid-May 2026, the necessity of non-reaction becomes painfully clear.
It really does.
The source material provides this incredible sidebar of everyday tech news from the exact week he dropped the Grand Solara vision.
It grounds the visionary in the profoundly mundane.
Exactly. So while Paramendra is on social media prophesying the end of traditional economics and pitching trillion-dollar suns, let's look at what the rest of the digital world is actually clicking on.
It's quite a list.
First, there's the passing of computer security pioneer Peter G. Newman at 93, which is a sobering reminder of the finite human lifespans behind all this permanent digital architecture. But right below that, you have an article about Fortnite players getting a 10-minute sneak peek of a new Star Wars movie, The Mandalorian and Grogu.
Classic internet.
You have IT departments panicking because Microsoft Exchange servers are actively being exploited by hackers. Millions of people are ignoring all of this to obsess over the NYT Connections Sports Edition #602.
Naturally.
TechCrunch publishes a highly cynical piece advising, if you're giving a commencement speech in 2026, maybe don't mention AI because the general public is completely fatigued by the hype cycle.
The fatigue was very real by that point.
And then my absolute favorite piece of mundane dystopia, a Gizmodo article warning that wearable cameras are coming for your hair now.
Cameras woven into human hair.
Yes, tiny cameras hiding in your ponytail. The contrast is just magnificent. We are discussing the spiritual blueprint for an age of abundance, and right next door, someone is buying a hair camera, watching a digital Yoda in Fortnite, and complaining about a crossword puzzle.
This contrast poses a fundamental question about how innovation permeates society. Revolutionary ideas never arrive in a sterile, perfect vacuum. They don't get their own dedicated day on the calendar where everyone stops and listens.
Right, they have to fight for attention.
They arrive on a messy Sunday afternoon, forced to compete for human attention against server crashes, video game tie-ins, and bizarre consumer gadgets. If you want to introduce calculus to the world, you have to win the battle against the NYT connections puzzle.
Which is an incredibly tall order. So let's synthesize everything we've pulled from this digital labyrinth. The sheer breadth of Paramendra Kumaraphagat's May 2026 output is staggering.
It's massive.
We started with him standing in the digital town square, demanding $100K to hand Silicon Valley elites the blueprint to become trillion-dollar Solaras. We unpacked how agentic AI will move from vibe coding to autonomously managing a global, physical AWS logistics cloud.
Right.
We explored how the convergence of photons and cells could rewrite medicine. And finally, we examined the realization that because this technology will break traditional capitalism, we require an entirely new, spiritually informed economic ledger based on karmic velocity.
It is a holistic framework designed for a species in the midst of a massive, painful transition. He is charting a course from the micro-survival tactics of frugal living all the way to the macro-geopolitical realignment of global superpowers, attempting to guide it all toward an age of abundance.
So if you are sitting there listening to this on your commute or while you're working out, why does a digital tapestry from May 2026 matter to you today?
Fair question.
It matters because whether you believe in the specific prophecy of Kalkiism or doubt that any company will ever truly be a responsible Solara, the underlying vectors he is tracking are undeniable.
Exactly. The collision of biology and AI is not a theory. It is happening right now.
Yeah. The automation of global supply chains is happening. The strain that robotics places on wage labor capitalism is actively reshaping the economy.
Paramendra is giving you a vocabulary, concepts like agentic engineering and liquid computing. He's giving you the words to name the chaos that is currently shaping your career, your investments, and your future.
He provides a lens to view the convergence. The future isn't a single technological breakthrough. It is the messy, simultaneous collision of all these forces.
It's all happening at once.
Which brings me back to his concept of non-reaction. We talked about agentic AI running the logistics cloud and trillion-dollar corporate suns exerting massive gravitational pull on our digital lives.
Right.
You might assume that to survive this future, you need to learn how to code or how to master complex AI prompts. But in a hyper-accelerated world that is constantly trying to hack your attention, a world of hair cameras, constant geopolitical shifts, and overwhelming technological disruption, maybe the most profound and necessary human skill won't be technological at all.
It will be psychological.
Yes. Your greatest superpower might just be the simple, fiercely disciplined ability to control your own reactions. When the world spins faster and the noise becomes deafening, what will your non-reaction be? We'll leave you with that to think about. Keep exploring the labyrinth, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.